G'day and welcome back to the channel. Are you struggling with shoulder pain at the tip of your shoulder that won't go away? If you are, you're not alone. Subacromial impingement syndrome can very easily be a constant battle. A, because it can genuinely feel crap to have. And B, because sometimes the treatments that we give you may not necessarily address the underlying cause of why that part of your shoulder has become sore in the first place. But the good news is, improving pain from subacromial impingement may not have to be as difficult as it's felt to this point. And in this video, I want to take you through 3 really simple mobility exercises for your shoulder that hope to go after the step before why your subacromial space is starting to impinge when it shouldn't. If you want to watch the extended cut of this video, please consider becoming a member. So let's get into it. So as always, the first thing that we need to talk about before we get to the exercises in this video is we need to give you context and perspective. The reason why your subacromial space may be impinging in the first place has everything to do with how the rest of your shoulder complex is moving and functioning. When you move, your shoulder blade has to slide around your upper back in whatever direction that you need it to for you to express normal range of motion. And if you have a handbrake at the top of your upper back, but still go to try and move your shoulder through your full range, suddenly we rob you of some slack in the system. And instead of your shoulder blade moving up as your arm moves up, if that shoulder blade gets stuck and your arm still needs to move, it can become a lot easier to jam up your shoulder underneath that subacromial space. Further to this, if you have any muscular tightness around the shoulder, most commonly at the back of the shoulder, tissue restrictions somewhere around that shoulder can again pull enough slack out of the system that then asks the space that should be a space to jam up and be loaded up differently than what your shoulder mechanics would otherwise be looking for. And hopefully as we get through these exercises, you'll hopefully better understand the role that each area might be playing in your symptoms. But we ultimately need to look more broadly than where your shoulder pain actually is to understand why it's actually there. And the other thing that I want to get to before we get into these exercises is that in order to best understand what is contributing to your shoulder pain the most, it's really important that we do a couple of baseline tests to see how you feel in the beginning, so that as you do each one of these exercises, you can immediately recheck the same test to see if your symptoms and your pain has improved straight away. And so in terms of those tests, they could be something as simple as having your arms by your side with your thumbs out and just lifting your arms up as high as you feel comfortable. Take note of what range you feel painful in. And then, as I said, immediately come back and do it again after you've done each one of these exercises. So the reason why this is the first exercise is that it's often the main hidden issue that sends people down the path of potentially developing subacromial impingement that I see clinically day to day. And as I mentioned, if you do find that you have developed some restrictions through your upper back soft tissue, or more specifically, the joints of your rib cage and the joints of your upper back, the spine itself, if we suddenly stiffen up or restrict the tissue and the mechanisms of that upper back, all of a sudden we can't express as normal or as fluent movement as we otherwise could. So if you can take a lacrosse ball or a tennis ball, we want to place that anywhere in the upper back from the very top all the way down to the very bottom of that shoulder blade. Gently recline down on top of the ball. You can certainly do this in sitting or standing if lying down is too uncomfortable for you. But as always with this exercise, we don't want you to be right in the middle of the spine on the bumps that go down the middle of your back. We want you to literally roll straight off of that so that we're on the spinal joints. If you come out a little bit closer again towards your shoulder blade, you'll be impacting the ribs, therefore the rib joints. Start right at the top at almost the base of your neck. Just roll your body slowly to the side that you're on just to get some pressure here. And we can get you just to stay here and let the ball press in. Or if your shoulder is comfortable enough to do this, we can have your arm up and just gently move into shoulder flexion as far as your shoulder or your symptoms allow. The benefit of doing this is we're using movement with the pressure from the ball to shear free the restricted tissue as we find it. And what you'll hopefully find is I come down a little bit lower and a little bit more onto the ribs where I feel a little bit stiff today. What you should always feel is that as you come to the end of your range, so for me, I feel like I get to here before I feel tight and restricted, I can't go any further. What you should find is as you gently oscillate in and out of this end range, the tissue will start to give, and you should feel that your arm goes further and further and further as the muscles and the rib joints start to mobilize. And as you should hopefully see, you should be able to see more and more of the side of my face until you can get to the ground itself. Now, obviously, if you're dealing with sensitive, irritated tissue in your shoulder, just make sure that this feels genuinely comfortable and safe for you to do. If it doesn't, if it feels too soon or too irritated, then again, just leave the ball in the spot. Let gravity and the weight of your trunk pushing into that just gently mobilize and separate and free up that restricted tissue. Once you've been there, then systematically work your way down a little bit further, staying close to the spine or coming further out, sort of midway between the spine and your shoulder blade to hit the rib joints. And keep repeating this process systematically as you work your way all the way down to the base of that shoulder blade, spending the most time on the spots that feel the most restricted for you. And then, as always, what you should immediately see is as you come back to your shoulder tests, you deserve to feel that that mechanism is now smoother. If restrictions in your upper back joints, the rib cage, the soft tissue was a part of the mechanism that was jamming up that shoulder, then you deserve to feel some subtle or obvious improvements in your ability to move your shoulder straight away. So once you've explored what role, if any, restrictions in your upper back is having on the function of your shoulder, the next tissue we want to go looking at is your posterior shoulder joint capsule. In a perfect world, your shoulder is designed to have enough slack in the system to express normal range of motion in whatever direction you feel meaningful. But if you find that that capsule has become a little bit tighter for whatever reason, then again, your ability to express normal movement is reduced, increasing the likelihood of jamming something up or impinging something. And how I'd like you to do this is if I can get you down on all fours. Now you can certainly do this on a table if getting on the floor is too hard for you. The principle is the same. It's just that your legs will be straight as opposed to hips and knees being bent. We want you to drop down onto your elbows just so that we can direct as much pressure through this back of the shoulder as possible while avoiding any of your subacromial or shoulder pain symptoms. From here, what we're looking for is we want your shoulders to be back just to take some of the slack out of the system. And all we're doing here is we're shifting your body weight across to that side. We want to imagine that your arm bone or your humerus is pushing out the back corner of your shoulder. So you should be feeling or aiming to feel some pressure at the back side towards your armpit a little bit. You should not be feeling anything jam up in that shoulder. If you are, we may need to get you to come up and over it a little bit more just so we're out of that acute sort of flexed shoulder position. Shoulders back, just maneuver yourself around to find where the best version of that pressure is for you at the back of the shoulder. And then we just want to hang out here for 30 seconds, 60 seconds, 2 minutes, whatever you feel is comfortable and tolerable for you at any given moment. Once you've had enough of that, we can also play around with where your forearm is pointed towards, knowing full well that if we rotate your forearm towards you a little bit more and increase the internal shoulder rotation demands, we can start to bias more of the back of the shoulder. But the only catch here is that the more you are internally rotated, the more, if you are lacking flexibility, more likely you are to expose some of those shoulder impingement symptoms. So if you feel you are particularly irritated or annoyed at the moment, start with your forearms parallel to each other. If you feel like you can progress it a little bit more, then start to rotate that arm inwards while getting into the same shapes and positions that we did before. As I said, if you're standing, it's the same thing. We just want to bend over and go looking for the pressure through the back of that shoulder. And as we're doing with each exercise, once you've done that, not only do we want to make sure that you haven't exacerbated any of your symptoms, but from a mobility perspective, we need to reassess the movements that you did beforehand to, again, see if anything has genuinely changed. And then once you've worked on your upper back and your shoulder joint capsule, we can then take that same ball again to go looking through the rest of your shoulder for clues as to what soft tissues might be holding you back as well. And so when using that same tennis ball or lacrosse ball from before, the best place to start looking for some of these tissue restrictions tends to be the back of that shoulder. I haven't mentioned it to this point, but one of the main reasons why our upper back, the back of our shoulder joint capsule, and the tissues at the back of the shoulder tend to get tight and restricted in the first place is often a direct consequence of the shoulder postures and shapes that we get into the most throughout the day. Most likely the stationary ones, so if that's your mouse hand, if that's the side that you rest on while you're driving, if you sort of sit in the same position on the couch watching TV, whatever it might be, as soon as those shoulders drop and start to roll forward with gravity, the weight of the arm under gravity, again, just starts to hang off those specific structures, asking them to become restricted over time by way of compensation. So obviously improving those shoulder postures goes a long way to getting you to the point where you don't need to do this stuff anymore. But having said that, once you take your ball, we can place the ball in the back of that shoulder. We want to get you to lie down onto that ball. Now again, you can do this one standing up against a wall as well. It's all good. You may need to just roll your body a little bit towards the ball just to get enough pressure on it. I'll get you to have your elbow out to about 90 degrees if it's comfortable. If it's not, having it down lower is perfectly fine. And all we want you to do is once you've found a spot that feels a little bit sort of tight and restricted, similar to the upper back exercise, we can just get you to stay here, let the ball press in. Perhaps you can tense the muscle up for 5 to 10 seconds and then relax, prompt it to give, let the ball sink in a little bit deeper, go looking for the next spot, go hunting all the way around the back of that shoulder for anything that feels restricted. But again, if your symptoms aren't too irritable or you've made a little bit of progress with the previous 2 exercises, from here, keeping your elbow where it is, we can gently start to express internal rotation, where we're rotating your forearm down, opening up the back of that shoulder, trying to shear free some of that restricted tissue. Again, if your shoulder is irritable at the moment, this may not be the version of this exercise that will be the most beneficial for you, but just hunt around for things that feel tight. Just use gentle, respectful movement to shear that tissue free. And then again, same thing as before, immediately come back to see how your shoulder feels and functions after doing the ball exercise. So with all that being said, I genuinely hope that that was helpful for you. Just remember that your shoulder impingement, that subacromial space, and the tissues that are irritated and annoyed within that has to be there for a reason. And while it could be a bursa or a tendon or a muscle or a ligament or something else that's the source of your pain, there has to be a reason why that exact tissue in your body has become painful. And for me clinically, if you aren't taking that step back to look at the tissue in your upper back, the posterior shoulder joint capsule, and the soft tissue at the back of your shoulder, then you could be missing some of the hidden context that has asked that to be there in the first place. And all the medications and injections and surgeries and general strength work in the world can be helpful to some degree, but it may not be fixing the problem. I mentioned briefly that one of the reasons why a lot of these tissues become stiff is because postures tend to get a little bit crappy. If that is you, just try and be up into better shapes more consistently to just help this process along the way. If you did find this helpful, please consider leaving a like on the video and subscribing to the channel if you want more content like this from me. If you'd like to help support the channel in other ways, please consider leaving a super thanks or consider becoming a member for more extended versions of these videos and more exclusive access to me as a physiotherapist. But ultimately, thank you for watching and hope to see you next time.